What if the relentless pursuit of wealth isn't just human nature? What if a darker force is subtly influencing our insatiable desire for riches? Could a demonic entity, known as Mammon, be the hidden hand guiding the world economy? Mammon isn't merely a mythological figure relegated to ancient texts. He represents the very essence of greed and materialism, the driving force behind empires, the fuel for devastating economic crises, and the silent architect of much of modern society. He is the embodiment of avarice, a spirit that whispers temptations of boundless wealth, and whose influence, some believe, extends to the highest echelons of power. In this video, we'll uncover the shocking connections between ancient demonology, historical financial catastrophes like the infamous Tulip Mania and the disastrous South Sea Bubble, and the intricate, often opaque, systems that govern our modern economy. We'll reveal how the spirit of Mammon may be subtly manipulating our world, shaping financial markets, and driving the endless accumulation of wealth at any cost. Are these mere coincidences, or is there a more sinister pattern at play? This video will demonstrate that unchecked greed, personified by Mammon, isn't simply a personal failing, a character flaw we can individually overcome. Instead, it's a systemic force, deeply embedded within our economic structures, creating profound instability, exacerbating inequality, and ultimately leading to unsustainable models that threaten the very fabric of society. We will delve into the possibility that the pursuit of endless growth, without regard for ethical or environmental consequences, is a direct manifestation of Mammon's influence. Now, the idea of a demonic force influencing something as complex as the global economy might seem far-fetched, even absurd to some. However, throughout history, societies have consistently turned to spiritual and religious frameworks to understand complex and often destructive human behaviors that defy rational explanation. We aim to use the figure of Mammon not as literal dogma, but as a lens through which to explore the darker aspects of economic behavior, the insatiable hunger for more, and the potential consequences of unchecked avarice on a global scale. So let's begin by delving into the origins of Mammon, tracing his fascinating evolution from ancient deity to the embodiment of greed in the modern world, and revealing the insidious ways his influence may be shaping our financial destiny. So, we've established that Mammon is more than just a name. He is a symbol, an embodiment of greed and materialism. But to truly grasp the depth of his influence, we must delve into the origins of this figure, tracing his transformation from a relatively neutral concept of wealth to the demonic representation of avarice we recognize today. This is not merely an exercise in etymology, but an investigation into how humanity's relationship with wealth has been shaped and distorted over time, setting the stage for the alleged demonic influence we are about to uncover. To begin, let's trace the etymological roots of Mammon, which lie in the ancient Semitic languages of Aramaic and Syriac. In these early languages, mammona simply meant wealth or riches. The term itself carried no inherently negative connotations. It was a neutral descriptor of material possessions, a word used in everyday commerce and record-keeping. We see its usage in texts like the Dead Sea Scrolls, where it refers to earthly treasures without moral judgment. These early cultures, while not demonizing wealth outright, certainly had ethical considerations surrounding its accumulation and use. The Old Testament, for instance, contains numerous warnings against oppressing the poor and exploiting workers for financial gain. The implication was always that wealth should be acquired and used justly. But when did this neutral term begin its descent into the darkness of demonology? The transformation of Mammon from a simple descriptor of wealth into a demonic entity is a complex process that evolved through different religious and occult traditions. The crystallization of Mammon as a demon occurred primarily within Christian demonology, solidifying his association with greed, avarice, and materialism. The attributes that define Mammon are now inextricably linked to gold, coins, and the insatiable pursuit of worldly possessions. Tertullian, an early Christian author writing in the 2nd century AD, famously equated mammon with evil covetousness. This association became more pronounced over time, with mammon increasingly depicted as an adversary to spiritual pursuits. But what truly cemented Mammon's place in the infernal hierarchy? Consider the contrast between Mammon and Lucifer. Lucifer represents pride and rebellion against God, while Mammon embodies a more insidious form of temptation, the allure of worldly comforts and the corruption of the soul through material desires. To illustrate Mammon's evolving role, consider his appearances in prominent works of literature and art. John Milton's Paradise Lost offers one of the most enduring portrayals of Mammon. In Milton's epic poem, Mammon is depicted as an angel who, even in heaven, was more concerned with earthly treasures than with divine glory. Milton writes of Mammon, "Mammon led them on, Mammon, the least erected spirit that fell from heaven. For even in heaven, his looks and thoughts were always downward bent, admiring more the riches of heaven's pavement, trodden gold, than aught divine or holy else enjoyed in vision beatific." Milton's portrayal shaped the understanding of Mammon as the embodiment of worldly desires, corruption, and the dangerous allure of wealth, influencing generations of artists and writers who followed. But how did this literary portrayal reflect deeper societal anxieties? The association of Mammon with greed wasn't simply a religious or artistic invention. Historical and cultural factors played a crucial role, particularly anxieties about wealth inequality, corruption within religious institutions, and the abuse of economic power. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the Church itself became increasingly wealthy and entangled in worldly affairs. This led to widespread criticism and accusations of hypocrisy, with figures like Mammon serving as a convenient scapegoat for these societal ills. The rise of capitalism and the increasing emphasis on material success further fueled these anxieties. As societies became more focused on wealth accumulation, the dangers of greed and avarice became more apparent, and Mammon became a potent symbol of these destructive tendencies. But is that all there is to it? While Mammon's mythological origins are compelling, the more disturbing aspect is the potential for his symbolic influence to manifest in modern society through individuals and institutions driven by unchecked greed. We are not suggesting that CEOs and bankers are literally possessed by a demon. Rather, the spirit of Mammon, the relentless pursuit of wealth above all else, may be a powerful, if unconscious, motivator behind many economic decisions. We will soon explore specific economic events, like financial crises or periods of intense speculation, and their possible connection to this underlying spirit, revealing patterns that may shock you. However, it's important to acknowledge the counterargument that Mammon is purely a symbolic figure, a literary device lacking any real-world power. Many argue that attributing economic phenomena to a demonic influence is a form of superstitious thinking, a way to avoid confronting the complex realities of human behavior and systemic issues. This perspective has validity. It's easy to dismiss the idea of Mammon as a quaint relic of the past. But even if we reject the literal existence of a demonic entity, it is critical to understand that Mammon, as a representation of real human tendencies towards greed and materialism, is an extraordinarily useful framework for analyzing destructive economic behaviors. By personifying these tendencies, we can more clearly see their consequences and develop strategies to mitigate their impact. So, what's the final verdict? Whether interpreted literally as a demonic entity or symbolically as a representation of greed, the figure of Mammon provides a powerful and valuable lens through which to examine the destructive potential of unchecked avarice in shaping economic systems, societal values, and individual behavior. After all, isn't it said that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist? The question remains, is the modern economy under the influence of the demonic, or is it simply the result of human nature allowed to run rampant? In the following sections, we will explore this influence in specific economic contexts throughout history, and the unsettling patterns that emerge may forever alter your perception of the forces that truly shape our world. To truly understand how the spirit of Mammon manifests in the real world, we must move beyond abstract definitions and examine a concrete historical example where unchecked avarice led to devastating consequences. We're not talking about simple business competition or the usual ups and downs of the market. We're talking about something far darker, something that reveals the true potential for greed to corrupt entire societies. Prepare yourself, because the story we are about to uncover will challenge your understanding of economic exploitation and suffering. To illustrate this, let us turn to the Opium Wars of the 19th century, a conflict fueled by the British East India Company's relentless pursuit of profit at the expense of an entire nation. Imagine Qing Dynasty China, a society with strict trade policies and a rapidly growing addiction to opium, a drug deliberately introduced by the British. For years, Britain had been buying Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain, creating a massive trade deficit. The British East India Company, a powerful entity with its own army and vast political influence, sought a commodity to balance this trade. They found it in opium, grown in British-controlled India, and smuggled into China on a massive scale, creating a crisis that would forever stain the pages of history. The Opium Wars provide a chilling example of how the spirit of Mammon can corrupt entire economic systems. But what specific characteristics of greed were present in this event? Consider first the deliberate exploitation of addiction for financial gain. The British East India Company knowingly and intentionally cultivated opium and trafficked it into China, fully aware of its addictive properties and the devastating impact it would have on Chinese society. Second, there was a complete disregard for Chinese sovereignty and the immense social costs of opium addiction. The British government and the East India Company prioritized their own economic interests over the well-being and autonomy of the Chinese people. Finally, there was a systematic justification of immoral actions in the name of economic advantage. British officials and merchants rationalized the opium trade as a legitimate business activity, ignoring the ethical implications of their actions and the immense suffering they caused. The evidence of the devastating consequences of the opium trade is overwhelming. Statistics reveal that by the mid-19th century, millions of Chinese citizens were addicted to opium, leading to widespread social and economic disruption. Quotes from British officials at the time reveal a disturbing rationalization of the trade. One British official stated, "It is better for the Chinese to be poisoned by opium than for the British to be deprived of revenue." Accounts from Chinese citizens paint a grim picture of addiction, poverty, and despair. Families were torn apart, and entire communities were ravaged by the drug. The military conflicts themselves resulted in immense death and destruction, further destabilizing Chinese society. While China faced ruin, the British East India Company and the British Empire reaped immense profits, solidifying their economic and political dominance. But does simple economics fully account for such ruthlessness? Analyzing this historical evidence, we see a direct connection between the Opium Wars and the concept of Mammon. The British East India Company's relentless pursuit of wealth led to the systematic exploitation and destruction of Chinese society. This event stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked greed and the willingness to sacrifice human lives for economic gain. The immense profits reaped by the British came at the direct expense of the Chinese people, whose lives and livelihoods were destroyed by the deliberate introduction of a highly addictive and destructive drug. But what does that mean for today? But have these patterns of exploitation and prioritizing profit over people truly disappeared? Are there modern parallels to the Opium Wars? where the pursuit of wealth continues to drive exploitation and suffering, albeit in more subtle or indirect ways. As we move forward, we will explore the ethical practices of modern financial institutions and uncover potential corruption and manipulation driven by greed. Prepare yourself to confront the possibility that the spirit of Mammon may still be alive and well in the 21st century. Now, it's important to recognize that the Opium Wars were complex historical events driven by multiple factors, including geopolitical power struggles and trade imbalances. It's easy to see the surface level and perhaps be misled. Some argue that it was primarily a result of trade imbalances, not necessarily a manifestation of a demonic force. There is validity to these economic explanations. However, consider the scale and nature of the exploitation. Deliberately profiting from addiction, from the destruction of families and communities, reveals a deeper moral failing, an extreme prioritization of profit over human life. It is this extreme, this willingness to inflict immense suffering for financial gain, that aligns with the spirit of Mammon, whether or not a literal demon is involved. The idea that simple economic drive does not necessarily translate to demonic influence is worth recognizing. Regardless of the underlying causes or the presence of a literal demon, the Opium Wars serve as a stark and undeniable example of the destructive potential of unchecked greed, where the pursuit of wealth led to the systematic exploitation, suffering, and death of millions. We have to decide whether we're asleep or awake, and the choice is up to you. As we continue, we will examine whether this spirit of Mammon, this prioritization of profit over human well-being, continues to influence modern economic systems, revealing patterns of exploitation and injustice that may shock you. But we're just scratching the surface of what the modern economy has to offer. But have these patterns of exploitation and prioritizing profit over people truly disappeared? Are there modern parallels to the Opium Wars, where the pursuit of wealth continues to drive exploitation and suffering, albeit in more sophisticated ways? Prepare yourself to confront a disturbing reality. The spirit of Mammon didn't vanish with the Opium Wars. It has simply evolved, finding new avenues to exert its influence on the world stage. This leads us to the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, a seemingly complex financial event that, upon closer inspection, reveals itself as a modern-day manifestation of prioritizing profit over well-being, a situation where greed fueled an economic disaster with widespread consequences. While the Opium Wars involved the blatant trade of an addictive substance, the 2008 crisis showcased a more insidious form of exploitation, one masked by complex financial instruments and regulatory loopholes. Was this simply a case of economic mismanagement, or was something darker at play? To understand how the subprime mortgage crisis embodies the spirit of Mammon, let's briefly revisit the events leading up to the collapse. In the early 2000s, the housing market experienced a boom, fueled by low interest rates and a surge in demand. Lenders began offering subprime mortgages to borrowers with poor credit histories, making homeownership accessible to a wider range of people. These mortgages, often with adjustable interest rates, started low but would later reset to much higher levels. These mortgages were then bundled together into complex financial instruments called mortgage-backed securities, MBS, and collateralized debt obligations, CDOs, which were sold to investors around the world. Credit rating agencies, incentivized by fees from the financial institutions, gave these securities high ratings, masking the underlying risk. The regulatory environment was lax, allowing for excessive risk-taking and a lack of oversight. Key players like Lehman Brothers and AIG took on massive amounts of debt, amplifying the potential for disaster. But how does this seemingly technical financial crisis embody the spirit of Mammon? It's crucial to recognize that at its core, this crisis was driven by a relentless pursuit of short-term profits, even at the expense of long-term stability. Lenders prioritized originating as many mortgages as possible, regardless of the borrower's ability to repay. Wall Street firms packaged and sold these mortgages into complex securities, generating huge fees. Credit rating agencies turned a blind eye to the risks, motivated by their own financial gain. And executives at these firms reaped enormous bonuses, even as the system teetered on the brink of collapse. Predatory lending practices, such as adjustable-rate mortgages with hidden fees and balloon payments, targeted vulnerable borrowers who were often unaware of the risks they were taking. The entire system was built on a foundation of greed, excessive risk-taking, and a disregard for ethical lending standards. The consequences of the subprime mortgage crisis were devastating, providing concrete evidence of the destructive power of unchecked greed. Statistics reveal that millions of families lost their homes to foreclosure, devastating communities and shattering lives. Job losses soared as the financial crisis spread to other sectors of the economy. Home values plummeted, wiping out trillions of dollars in wealth. Anecdotes from individuals and families who lost their homes paint a grim picture of despair and financial ruin. Meanwhile, executives at the very firms that caused the crisis walked away with exorbitant bonuses, further fueling public outrage. Specific examples of predatory lending practices reveal the callousness of the system, with borrowers lured into mortgages they could never afford, only to be stripped of their homes and savings. Analyzing this evidence, we can draw stark parallels between the subprime mortgage crisis and the Opium Wars. Both events demonstrate a willingness to sacrifice human well-being for economic gain. The Opium Wars involved the deliberate exploitation of addiction, while the subprime mortgage crisis involved the exploitation of vulnerable borrowers. In both cases, short-term profits were prioritized over long-term stability, leading to widespread suffering and economic devastation. This crisis serves as a modern cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked greed, the systemic risks created by prioritizing short-term profits, and the potential for financial innovation to be used for exploitative purposes. It confirms that prioritizing profit at all costs is a timeless and devastating vice. But have the regulatory reforms implemented after the 2008 crisis truly addressed the underlying issues of greed and systemic risk? Were these reforms sufficient, or were they merely surface-level changes that failed to tackle the core problem? And what about moral hazard? The idea that institutions will take on more risk if they know they will be bailout out by the government, has that truly been solved? What new forms might Mammon's influence take in an increasingly complex and interconnected global economy? These are the questions we must confront as we delve deeper into the subtle and pervasive ways that the spirit of Mammon may be shaping the modern economy. Now, it's important to acknowledge the counterargument that the subprime mortgage crisis was a complex event with multiple contributing factors. Government policies promoting homeownership, flawed risk models used by financial institutions, and unforeseen economic shocks all played a role. It's easy to point to the confluence of multiple events and say it was not necessarily a manifestation of a demonic force. Attributing it solely to greed or a demonic influence is a simplification. There is validity to these factors. However, consider the moral dimension of knowingly exploiting vulnerable borrowers for profit. The active participation of multiple actors, from lenders to credit rating agencies to Wall Street firms, while making blame difficult to assign, also expands the scale of the malfeasance. Regardless of these complexities, and despite other potential explanations, the subprime mortgage crisis, like the Opium Wars, serves as a compelling example of the destructive potential of unchecked greed and the influence it wields even within complex systems. As we continue, we will explore the subtle and pervasive ways that the spirit of Mammon may be shaping the modern economy, even in the absence of overt exploitation, focusing on new vectors like technology and algorithmic trading, revealing patterns of exploitation and injustice that may shock you. The true cost will make itself apparent. Is it possible Mammon is simply a useful lens through which to understand moral failings? If the subprime mortgage crisis revealed the devastating consequences of greed at the street level, are there more subtle and pervasive mechanisms through which the spirit of Mammon now operates in the modern economy? This leads us to the realm of algorithmic trading and AI-driven finance, a seemingly abstract world of code and data that, upon closer inspection, reveals itself as a new frontier for unchecked greed and potential manipulation. But is this simply a case of technological advancement, or are there darker, more insidious forces at play, shaping the very algorithms that drive our financial markets? To understand how algorithmic trading can embody Mammon's influence, we must first provide a brief history of its development. Algorithmic trading, also known as automated trading or black box trading, began as a simple tool for executing orders more efficiently. In its early days, it was primarily used to break large orders into smaller pieces and execute them over time, minimizing market impact and reducing transaction costs. This was seen as a positive development, increasing market efficiency and liquidity. However, as technology advanced, algorithmic trading evolved from simple order execution to complex strategies involving high-frequency trading, HFT, statistical arbitrage, and sophisticated market-making techniques. Key figures like Edward Thorpe, who applied quantitative methods to blackjack and later to the stock market, laid the groundwork for this evolution. The initial promise of increased market efficiency and liquidity gradually gave way to a relentless pursuit of speed and profit maximization, with firms investing heavily in infrastructure and algorithms to gain even the slightest edge over their competitors. This evolution prioritized speed and profit maximization above all else. Now let's define algorithmic trading and its core mechanisms, emphasizing how these systems can embody Mammon's influence. Algorithmic trading involves the use of computer programs to automatically execute trades based on a predefined set of instructions. These algorithms can be designed to exploit market inefficiencies, front-run orders, illegally acting on information about a large pending order before it is executed, and engage in predatory trading practices, all in the pursuit of maximizing profits, irrespective of ethical implications or overall market stability. A crucial aspect of algorithmic trading is its black box nature, meaning that the inner workings of these algorithms are often opaque and difficult to understand, even for experts. This lack of transparency reduces human oversight and creates opportunities for algorithms to operate in ways that are not easily detected or controlled. The incentives within these systems are often misaligned, rewarding short-term profits at the expense of long-term stability, creating a fertile ground for the spirit of Mammon to take hold. What concrete evidence reveals algorithmic trading as a modern proxy for greed? We must look at specific examples of algorithmic trading glitches and flash crashes that have resulted in significant market volatility and financial losses. One of the most infamous examples is the 2010 flash crash, during which the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged nearly 1,000 points in a matter of minutes, only to recover just as quickly. This event was triggered by a single large sell order executed by an algorithm that interacted in unintended ways with other algorithms in the market, creating a cascade of sell orders and a temporary collapse of prices. Another example is the case of Knight Capital Group, a market maker that lost $440 million in just 45 minutes due to a software glitch in its algorithmic trading system. These events expose the potential dangers of unchecked automation and the unintended consequences of prioritizing speed and profit above all else. The ease with which millions can be lost in minutes underscores the immense power and potential for destruction wielded by these systems. Analyzing this evidence, can we truly separate these algorithmic trading glitches from the pervasive influence of Mammon? These events can be interpreted as modern-day manifestations of greed-driving technological systems. The relentless pursuit of profit maximization, even when automated, can lead to instability and harm in the financial system. The lack of accountability and the difficulty of assigning blame when algorithms go awry further exacerbate the problem, creating a system where unethical behavior can thrive with little consequence. It's not simply a matter of bad code. It's a reflection of the underlying values and incentives that prioritize profit above all else. The algorithms are built to maximize profit, often without regard for broader consequences. But are these problems merely technical glitches, or are these glitches symptoms of a deeper, more systemic problem? Could the issue be the financial system being increasingly structured to benefit a select few at the expense of the many? This leads us to consider the role of tax loopholes, offshore accounts, and other mechanisms that facilitate wealth concentration as further examples of Mammon's influence. If algorithms represent greed weaponized through technology, what other systemic loopholes provide shelter for this spirit, allowing it to operate with impunity on a global scale? What role do ratings agencies play when they knowingly give high ratings to risky assets? Now, it's important to acknowledge the counterargument that algorithmic trading, in general, isn't inherently evil. In fact, algorithmic trading has led to narrower bid-ask spreads and increased liquidity. This increased liquidity and efficiency, in turn, can benefit even the retail investor by making it easier and cheaper to trade. However, recognizing these potential benefits doesn't negate the potential for abuse. We must consider the ethical responsibility of developers and regulators to ensure these systems are used responsibly and do not exacerbate inequality or create systemic risk. Despite these potential benefits and good intentions, the unchecked pursuit of profit maximization within algorithmic trading and the blind faith in algorithms can still lead to negative consequences, reinforcing the overarching theme of Mammon. It's essential to consider robust regulatory oversight to prevent these technologies from becoming tools of exploitation and instability. But what is it about the broader issue of wealth concentration that allows these issues to persist? What mechanisms allow the spirit of Mammon to thrive even when individual actors are trying to do good? Is the system itself the problem? As we draw to a close in our exploration of Mammon and its influence on the world economy, it's time to reflect on the darkness we've uncovered, the shadows we've glimpsed behind the veil of modern finance. Have we merely been chasing ghosts in the machine, or have we unearthed a profound truth about the forces shaping our world? In summary, this video has explored how the concept of Mammon, representing unchecked greed and the relentless pursuit of wealth, provides a powerful framework for understanding destructive economic patterns throughout history. We examined specific instances where the prioritization of profit over all other considerations led to exploitation, suffering, and systemic instability. From the Opium Wars, where empires prioritized trade over human lives, to the 2008 financial crisis, which revealed the dangers of short-term gains over long-term stability, and the rise of algorithmic trading, which highlights how technology can amplify greed, these examples paint a disturbing picture of Mammon's pervasive influence. While the details of each instance differ, they share a common, unsettling thread. The pursuit of wealth, unchecked by ethical considerations, leads to devastating consequences for individuals, societies, and the planet. Is this merely coincidence, or is there a deeper, more sinister force at work, subtly guiding these events towards predetermined ends? This exploration of Mammon's influence inevitably leads us to larger questions about human values and societal priorities. Are we, as a society, prioritizing economic growth above all else, even at the expense of human well-being, environmental sustainability, and social justice? Are we so focused on accumulating wealth that we have lost sight of the true cost of our actions? Furthermore, we must consider the question of individual responsibility in the face of such systemic greed. What role do individuals play in perpetuating or challenging these patterns of exploitation and inequality? Is it even possible to participate in the modern economy without, in some way, contributing to Mammon's influence? Can we truly separate ourselves from a system that seems to reward greed and punish ethical behavior? These are not easy questions, and they demand careful consideration and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions and biases. The pervasiveness of greed raises profound philosophical implications. Does it suggest a deeper flaw in human nature, a kind of inherent selfishness that drives us to accumulate wealth at the expense of others? Or is it rather a product of specific economic systems and cultural values that incentivize greed and discourage altruism? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, with both inherent human tendencies and external factors contributing to the problem. Regardless of the cause, the consequences of unchecked greed are undeniable, and they demand our attention and action. But given the deeply entrenched nature of these patterns, is there any hope for change? Can we truly overcome the influence of Mammon, or are we doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past? While the conclusions we've reached in this video may be unsettling, even discouraging, it is important to remember that awareness of these patterns is the first, crucial step towards positive change. Only by recognizing the insidious influence of Mammon can we begin to challenge the systems and structures that perpetuate greed and inequality. By shining a light on the darkness, we can begin to dismantle the power structures that have allowed greed to thrive for so long. And most importantly, we can begin to cultivate a more ethical and sustainable approach to economics, one that prioritizes people and planet over profit. The spirit of Mammon may be pervasive, but it is not invincible. The choice to prioritize people over profit ultimately lies with us. If you're ready to explore more stories like this, uncover hidden truths, and dive deeper into the esoteric forces shaping our world, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts and insights in the comments section below and join the growing community of truth seekers. Stay tuned for future content exploring related topics, such as the concentration of wealth, the role of tax loopholes, and potential solutions for creating a more equitable and sustainable economy. We are dedicated to providing you with unique perspectives and alternative interpretations of complex issues, challenging conventional narratives and encouraging critical thinking. Join us as we continue to unveil the secrets that lie hidden beneath the surface of our world. Stay vigilant against the shadows, and see you in the next revelation.